Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Sorry it's been so long since I've read. I went and picked up a friend. I've had some company, which has been really nice. But I'm back, and the first story that I'd like to read is called Whitefoot, the story of a wood mouse. Have you ever heard of a wood mouse? Well, we're going to find out about Whitefoot. Deep in the woods, a sleepy hermit thrush sang its twilight song. At the edge of the clearing, fireflies began to flicker. Above the treetops sailed a pale August moon. It was time for animals of the day to go to sleep, for animals of the night to wake up. You know that some animals are awake in the day and sleep at night, and others are awake at night and sleep in the day. Those ones are called nocturnal. A red bat yawned on her leafy perch and stretched a scalloped wing. A moth fluttered by, and the hungry bat took off after it. Bats eat flying bugs. A pair of flying squirrels peered from their nest hole. Scuttling out, they glided into the darkness. They were hungry too. A saw-whet owl flew through the woods on silent wings. Beneath her, a mouse squeaked among the leaves. The little owl plunged headward. Talons, that's like the claws at the end of her foot, spread wide. Just in the nick of time, the mouse leaped into a sheltering hole. Snapping her beak, the feathered hunter flew away. So the owl's still hungry, but the little mouse got away. A few minutes later, a tiny, quivering nose peeked out of the hole and sniffed the air. Bulging black eyes peered into the night. Long whiskers probed the darkness like fingers, and big twitching ears strained to hear the faintest sound. So she's being very careful to make sure it's safe. All clear. The little wood mouse hopped out of her retreat. Sitting on her haunches like a squirrel, she began to groom herself. First she licked her fur, then she scrubbed her face with her tiny white fingers and combed her tail. She was very careful about keeping herself neat and clean. If you have a kitty, they groom themselves by licking too. Her back and sides were soft brown, but her feet and underparts were snowy white. Because of her color, some people know her as a deer mouse. Others call her a white-footed mouse. From the tip of her nose to the end of her tail, she was just 7 inches long. Oh, maybe as long as my hand. That counts her tail. And half of that was tail. Hungrily, she ate some violet seeds, then nibbled at a tender mushroom. She explored the log for beetle grubs and finished her meal with a juicy huckleberry. Suddenly, she heard a soft trilling sound come from a nearby beech tree. Excited, Whitefoot drummed on the ground with her front paws. Then she ran towards the tree and up the trunk. Coming down to meet her was another wood mouse. Back and forth the two mice scampered, chasing each other through the branches. Leaping to the ground, they raced across the forest floor and played hide and seek among the leaves. Trilling at last, Whitefoot led the male back to her snug round nest under an old chestnut stump. They were friends. A few days later, the restless male wandered off, but not Whitefoot. In 3 weeks, she gave birth to 5 babies, her third litter since spring. Hardly bigger than crickets, the baby mice were naked and pink. Their eyes were closed, their ears wrinkled and small. Whitefoot was a good mother. She licked the young ones clean and kept them warm. She nursed them many times a day. Only at night did she leave them to hunt for food for herself. They were tiny. She was nursing the babies one evening when a skunk wandered by the stump. He smelled the ice and started to dig after them. Whitefoot hurried away through the tunnel at the back of the nest, dragging her family with her. So I'll show you a picture of the skunk first. A skunk would eat those babies. The skunk would eat Whitefoot. Each baby was hanging tightly to one of her nipples. That's where they got the milk. She took her young into a hole under a big rock. For a moment they were all safe, but this refuge was damp and wet. They couldn't stay there. The babies would get too cold and die. Finally, the skunk went away. Then Whitefoot picked up one of the little ones in her mouth. The baby curled around her neck and held on with its tiny feet. Scrambling up the trunk of the old beech tree, Whitefoot carried the youngster into a deserted woodpecker hole. Leaving it there, she went back for the others. One by one, she brought them to their new home. The next night, Whitefoot built a new nest at the bottom of the hole. She gathered dry leaves and moths and added some feathers she found. Using her nimble fingers and sharp teeth, she worked the material into a soft, balled shelter, as warm and snug as it could be. By the time they were 2 weeks old, the little mice had grown coats of silky gray hair. Their eyes were open now, and they were very active. When they were 3 weeks old, they started to crawl out of the nest hole and explore the outside world. Within a few days, they could climb and leap almost as well as their mother. Look at those little wackies. They began to nibble on seeds and berries. They started to pounce on crickets and to hunt for other tiny tidbits too. They learned how to drink raindrops and dew from the leaves. Like their mother, the youngsters dashed for shelter at every strange sound or sight. Hop, hop, a fat toad lumbered by. Golden eyes blinked. He couldn't hurt them. He would if he could catch them, but they were too fast. Thump, 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 a young cottontail padded by. He wouldn't hurt them either. But the woods were full of real dangers for little mice. A hungry fox snapped up one of them. Oh. A weasel caught another, and a black snake ate a third. Only 2 were left. In 5 weeks, the remaining youngsters were almost as big as Whitefoot. And here is a picture of the weasel. They looked just like her too, except that their fur was gray while hers was brown. It would be several months before their coats grew like hers. Whitefoot had done all she could for the 2 young mice. They were ready to take care of themselves. Soon they would have families of their own. She left them and moved into an empty nest bird's nest in a sassafras tree. They're just running around. And they do look just like her. She roofed the nest over with milkweed and thistledown, leaving only a tiny hole for a door. When she was home, she plugged that too. Inside, she was snug and safe then. Look at the little nest she made herself. Acorns and beech nuts ripened in the October woods, and dogwoods were bright with red berries. Monarch butterflies had begun to fly south, and many birds were leaving too. The birds, the monarch. Almost every night, Whitefoot visited a nearby cornfield to feast on the yellow harvest. So did raccoons and opossums and other animals. Whitefoot met other wood mice there, and many field mice too. Some of them had nests under the shucks of corn. The field mice were bigger than Whitefoot, but had smaller eyes and ears and shorter tails. Their fur was dark gray, a dark gray, sooty gray. There they are, eating the farmer's corn. Sometimes Whitefoot saw jumping mice with big hind legs and very long tails. I heard those called kangaroo rats. If something frightened them, they sailed away with great leaps like kangaroos. There's one right there. The nights grew cold and frosty, and red and yellow leaves fell from the trees. Winter was on its way. Some animals, like woodchucks, slept all winter, but not Whitefoot. She began to lay in stores of food for the long, cold months to come. Each time she left her nest, she filled her cheek pouches with seeds or nuts before returning home. That's how God made them. Their pouches could puff out really big and hold a lot of food. She hid her stores in all sorts of nooks and crannies close to the nest. Here she is getting something right there. One evening, when she peeked out, the woods were blanketed with white. Snow had fallen during the day. Venturing out, she left tiny feathery tracks behind her. Plop! She fell into a big hole in the snow. Scrambling up the other side, she scampered on. Soon she came to another hole and another. The holes were paw prints left by a big black bear. Those paw prints are bigger than Whitefoot. Snow piled deeper and deeper in the woods as the weeks went by. Now Whitefoot traveled through tunnels under the snow to get her stores of food. One night, she crawled down to an abandoned chipmunk hole to get some stored beech nuts. There she met one of the fiercest animals in all the forest for its size, a short-tailed shrew. A shrew can kill a mouse with its bite. Look at all those teeth. Can you see him? The little meat eater lunged at Whitefoot. Sharp teeth bared. Whitefoot jumped back, kicking dirt in his face, but he came again. Leaping over the shrew, Whitefoot knocked him down with a sharp blow of her hind feet. Before he could recover, she had fled. By mid-February, Whitefoot's store of seeds, nuts were almost gone. Searching for food, she ranged farther and farther from her nest. Yeah, she's got to eat. Sometimes she was lucky enough to find a cocoon. Gnawing through the tough silken covers, she would make a good meal from the fat pupa inside. But other times she went hungry. One night, she scampered back and forth in the frozen cornfield, looking for seeds. Soon she was near the farmer's barn. Creeping close, she peered into the stable through a crack under the door. Inside, the air was warm and dry. It smelled of grain and mash and lots of clover hay. Whitefoot crept under the door and up a corner post. Below, cows moved in their stalls, and a horse tossed its mane and stamped. In his grain box, Whitefoot spied a few kernels of corn. Climbing down a dangling rope, she dropped into the feed box and picked up a kernel. Sitting on her haunches, she ate it, and then another and another. Do you think that horse liked to share with her? With a startled squeal of terror, she jumped aside as a tawny striped shape leaped towards her. A cat's sharp claws slammed into the wood, just missing her. Whitefoot shrieked for her life. She made it to a crack under the door just in time. She was lucky. The stable was a dangerous place for mice, but so were the midwinter woods, and food was hard to find there. Whitefoot moved into a bird box in an apple tree near the farmhouse. Nearby was a corn crib with plenty of food. Now this picture that I'm going to show you is when she decided to go into a birdhouse. One evening in March, she discovered a bucket hanging on the trunk of a big sugar maple tree. Drops of sap were falling into the bucket from a tube in the tree trunk. Perching on the spout, Whitefoot drank the sweet maple sap until her stomach bulged and she had a big belly. With April, the nights grew milder, the earth greener. Finally, the old apple tree burst into bloom. Spring had come at last. One sunny morning, Whitefoot was wakened by a bubbling song just outside her door. There was a flutter of wings, and a little brown bird peered into the house. A wren had come back to its old home. When it saw Whitefoot, the wren chattered indignantly and then flew away. I think it was saying, "Why are you in my house? That's my house." That evening, Whitefoot scampered out of the birdhouse and started back into the woods. In the distance, frogs sang their spring chorus. On a branch above Whitefoot, a sleepy bird chirped. All over sailed a pale new moon. Whitefoot hurried on. It was time to find a new home. It was time to get ready to have another family. Well, that was a good story about a wood mouse. Did you learn anything? I didn't know that they kept going to different homes all the time. Well, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I love you. I really do. But even more importantly, God loves you, and He always will. All right. I'll be reading to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.